politics is pushing Florida's racist decisions against blacks when relying from the bench. The courts in Charlotte County, ran by Sheriff Bill Prummell and Punta Gorda, Police Chief Tom Lewis. If you are not rich and white, you are screwed. A Herald Tribune investigative report. Judicial decisions. Bias on the bench. Day 4 of 4. HeraldTribune.com/bias. Influenced by race and politics. Florida's bench is a world of contradictions. By Josh Salmon and Emily Lacaze. Judges in Florida say politics don't impact their rulings, that their age, gender and culture don't either. But their sentencing records show that's not true. Personal biases influence those who wear the robe, contributing to racial disparities in sentencing, a year-long Herald Tribune investigation using public records found. Democratic judges are more even-handed than Republicans. Black judges are more equitable than whites, and women are fairer than men. Everyone has an agenda, said Philip Padovano, a retired appellate judge in Florida. We are kidding ourselves if we think we don't. The Herald Tribune analyzed millions of criminal cases from the past 12 years to build a first-of-its-kind database of Florida judges, comparing sentencing patterns on everything from their age and previous work experience to their race and gender. The newspaper concentrated on third-degree felonies, the least serious and broadest class of felonies. See Judges, A7. Former Judge Philip Padovano in Tampa. Herald Tribune staff photo /Dan Wagner. Judges. Continued from A1. And pulled voter rolls in each Florida county to determine the political registration as of September of every judge occupying the nonpartisan position. Reporters first compared judges across the state according to data gathered by county clerks and then looked at their sentencing patterns using data from the Department of Corrections, which reveals the points scored by defendants at sentencing. That review showed that race, politics and gender steer most biases on the bench, but like all humans, judges are full of contradictions. Black judges, for example, don't always show empathy toward their own race. In fact, no group has a wider gap when it comes to sentencing black and white defendants than black Republicans. They sentence criminals of their own color to nearly 70% more confinement than white defendants for third-degree felonies. Judges also defy political stereotypes. Some Democrats in liberal South Florida are harder on blacks than many Republican judges across the state. In Republican strongholds, like Pensacola, there are GOP judges who sentence more like Democrats. Judges appointed by former Governor Lawton Chiles, a Democrat, hand out harsher sentences to blacks than those selected by Governors Jeb Bush and Charlie Crist, both Republicans, when they held the office. But under Governor Rick Scott, sentencing disparities swell again. Scott has appointed fewer black judges than his predecessors, making the bench whiter and more conservative. It's becoming a highly politicized judiciary, said Martin Dickman, a retired Tampa Bay Times associate editor who wrote a book on Florida's judges. And the qualities that make a good judge are not the qualities that make a good politician. I understand racial bias. The chief judge in Sarasota led a diversity program to provide scholarships to minority law students. He made it possible for kids in the school system to attend plays about Thurgood Marshall, the first black U.S. Supreme Court justice. He produced a documentary exploring high school football's role in integration and helped Booker High School students make a film about the local black community. He has been honored by the NAACP and a local Martin Luther King Jr. committee. But in the courtroom, Judge Charles Williams is tougher on his own race. Since 2004, he has sentenced whites convicted of third-degree felonies to an average of 121 days. He has locked up blacks for twice as long. Those sentencing disparities are the 11th widest among hundreds of Florida judges with at least 1,000 criminal decisions, according to a Herald Tribune analysis of the Offender-Based Transaction System, or OBTS, a database compiled by court clerks that tracks every criminal case in Florida from arrest to appeal. Chiles appointed Williams to the bench in 1997, following a career as a prosecutor and public defender. He became the circuit's first black judge. Since then, the 59-year-old has sentenced whites to an average of 1,060 days for robbery, according to data compiled by the Florida Department of Corrections. He locks up blacks with identical charges and records for more than double the time. Williams gives blacks 94% more confinement than whites who score the same points on felony drug charges, 51% more lockup for burglary, and 9% more time for the felony of driving with a suspended license for the third time. Those points are assigned to defendants based on the nature and severity of the crime committed, as well as other factors, such as past criminal history, use of a weapon, and whether anyone got hurt. The more points a defendant gets, the longer the recommended sentence. During a meeting with the newspaper, Williams attributed sentence discrepancies to plea negotiations. One of the big misconceptions is that the judge goes in and sentences everyone in a vacuum, Williams said. I would say 90 to 95% of the disparities are the result of negotiated pleas. Williams also cited the role of law enforcement officers, who decide to enter the system in the first place. The judges are made out to be the most powerful people in the justice system, he said. I think the most powerful people are the prosecutors and law enforcement officers. Williams, who changed his political registration from Republican to no party affiliation 5 days after meeting with the Herald Tribune, agrees there are racial biases in the system, especially with regards to the disproportionate arrests of black men. But he denied that he, or any other judge in his circuit, sentences blacks with a bias. I grew up in the South, Williams said. I understand racial bias. I understand what goes into it. I understand that there are people in this system, from law enforcement to judges, who have biases. But none of the judges I work with display racial biases, and if they did, I would call them on it. Those close to Williams say he is hamstrung by a system that puts his own race at a disadvantage. But they also say that he is savvy to the political realities of conservative Southwest Florida. You have to be a Republican to have any shot at the job here, said Adam Tebrug, a longtime criminal defense lawyer in Bradenton who considers Williams a mentor. Williams grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Pinellas County. He attended Howard University in Washington, D.C., before returning to the Sunshine State to receive a law degree from the University of Florida in 1982. Since then, he has remained immersed in issues affecting minorities. What I think puts him in a better. See Judges, A8. Quotes. I grew up in the South. I understand racial bias. I understand what goes into it. I understand that there are people in this system, from law enforcement to judges, who have biases. But none of the judges I work with display racial biases, and if they did, I would call them on it. Judge Charles Williams. Judge Charles Williams presides over a case in Sarasota. Herald Tribune staff photo / Dan Wagner. Former Sarasota County Commissioner Carolyn Mason. HT Archive. Judges. Continued from A7. Position to understand and to do something to help people more is his upbringing, said Carolyn Mason, a former Sarasota County Commissioner. He came up during the civil rights era. He grew up and he saw friends and acquaintances who for whatever reason got involved in the criminal justice system, and a lot of them were treated very unfairly. There are 28 black judges in Florida who rule on felonies. Collectively, they sentence more evenly than other judges. The 17 men in that group give whites 10% more time in lockup than blacks across third-degree felonies. Black Republicans tip the scale in the other direction. There are 5 black Republican judges in Florida who handle serious criminal cases. They confine white defendants for 131 days on average for third-degree felonies. Those same judges give black defendants 222 days, or 69% longer. Based just on sentencing averages, black Republican judges have the widest discrepancies when it comes to punishing black defendants. Black women judges, by contrast, are the most fair. But such comparisons can be deceiving. Black women also are the toughest judges. They hand down average sentences of 460 days for third-degree felonies, no matter the defendant's race. That compares with an average of 222 days for black defendants standing before black Republican judges, all but one of whom is male. So a typical black defendant will walk out of court with almost 8 fewer months of jail time with a black GOP judge than with a judge who is a black woman. It's a question of being fair versus being punitive, said Marit Rehavi, an economics professor at the University of British Columbia, who studies racial discrepancies in sentencing. We may help minorities most not by increasing fairness, but by reducing the punitiveness of sentencing. Others argue they would rather be treated fairly, even if it means more time. We don't mind hard but fair, said Larry Bird, a retired Alachua County correctional officer. There's a difference between me beating you up because you're black versus me beating you up because you did something wrong. Everybody screws up once in a while. Judge Dennis Murphy has presided over more than 9,000 criminal cases since 2004 alone. He has overseen trials for murder, white-collar FR,